Hey there everyone, and welcome to another video taking a look at all the monsters that came out in 2022. In this video we're going to look at all the shadow monsters that came out, and once again this is between the 6th and the 7th anniversary, so not anything after Halloween time, end of October, nothing since then. So same kind of structure as we normally have for these videos. Going to talk about shadow in general to begin with, then I'm going to talk through the new monsters, and then we're going to have a look at, well, I'm going to highlight which were the best monsters from the year and their kind of power level overall of these new monsters. There's links in the description to get to any part of this video. And this year in general, I'm calling the Year of Union. There are some Union monsters in this video, so yeah, I'll get to point out that, and we can see what's going on. So Shadow in general, it's the other aggressive element. So the elements which we looked at so far, Earth and Holy, are the very defensive elements. Fire and Shadow are the very aggressive elements. And then the last two, Storm and Water, they're kind of somewhere in between. And they have kind of more controlling stuff. This is all, very broadly speaking. Each of the individual monsters do their own thing, but generally that's what the elements do. So I would say this is slightly less aggressive than Fire, but it's up there. It's got a lot of high attack monsters and very aggressive monsters in it. Also, poison and stuff, which is generally aggressive strategy. So there's lots of demons, dragons, and phantoms. Makes sense in Shadow, that kind of thing. The other thing is that Shadow just has so many more monsters than the other elements. It's got a lot more support again this year with lots of new monsters. And now it's just extended its lead. So originally Shadow, I think it's pretty much always had slightly more Legendaries and Mythics than the other elements, but only slightly more. Now it's at the point, I think it's on 60, it's on 63, and there's like about 50 in the other ones on average, I think. So it's about, 20% more, a little over 20% more than the other elements, which is crazy. They just love making shadow monsters, and it's not just like Legendaries and Mythics, we also get more in the super epics and stuff. So Shadow has generally done quite poorly in PvP, and because now it's getting consistently more monsters than the other elements, it's starting to just look a little bit better, as we'll see as we look at some of these monsters this year, and I think probably next year as well, hopefully, it will be getting more support. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. In this video we have 4 Mythics, 4 Legendaries, and 5 Super Epics to go through. But yeah, before we do that, let's just have a look at the themes in Shadow. So the first theme is the Guaranteed Kill theme. So this is coming up more in other elements now, but it is far more prevalent in Shadow. And what I mean by this is like death sentence stuff, as you can see there on the right. Marks an enemy, they die off after a certain amount of time. We've got Petrify Revenge. There's like a few of those. There's actually a couple in Earth, but it's a guaranteed kill. And then on the left here we've got a bunch which have various moves that will guarantee kill an enemy if some kind of conditions met, usually. Yeah, Shadow has this kind of across it. It's not a theme you build around at all, it's just a theme that is in the element. A bunch of the monsters have it. The next theme is Poison theme, so I mentioned this just a minute ago. There's a lot of poison monsters in Shadow. I think Shadow does it maybe even arguably better than Fire does. Well, okay, actually, no, I think Fire does it better. Fire does it better, but that's mainly because of like Magma Kund, basically. Otherwise, Shadow has a lot to offer with the poison, and you can definitely, if we were to do a Link Shadow team and you just had to put some monsters together, poison may not be the absolute core theme of what it's doing, but it will definitely be part of it. Well, most likely be part of it. There's quite a lot of poison in Shadow is what I'm trying to say. So there's also a fair bit of poison immunity. There you can see Magatsuo on the right hand side has poison immunity. Don't know if any of the others here have poison immunity, but there's a bunch of shadow monsters with poison immunity. So if poison's ever a big thing, you can use some shadow poison immune monsters. And then lastly we have the AoE spam sub-theme. So this is something that basically it's in here because when people have been using Link Shadow in the past, it's almost always been some kind of AoE spam setup. That is mainly with Nova Drake, but one of the more recent additions that's really good for this is Persephia. Since she got Slash All, she and also did like damage increases to the throw next. She can now actually be really good for doing the throw next and then doing slash all, and you do it with a give turn and stuff and clear through the enemies really effectively. So yeah, Shadow has a bunch of this kind of hit all stuff. You can also use it in PvE very effectively. So, you know, while it's a popular PvP strategy, you can do a bunch of it in PvE very well. I basically have as like my kind of general PvE farming team. I use Link Shadow and do it with AoE stuff because it can clear enemies really, really quickly. So yeah, that's something which Shadow can do that other elements don't really have this same kind of thing. And then lastly, you can see up here on the top right, the Necromancy minus minor theme. There's a few monsters in Shadow which can like revive something that just died. And actually I should elaborate just a little bit more. So this AoE spam type stuff, a lot of it revolves around Demon Toad, which is a Link monster, but its enraged teammate, they buffed at some point. It used to give plus 50% attack, but now it gives plus 100% attack. So it sets the defense to just minimum, but makes the enraged monster do crazy damage. So there's a bunch of good targets for it basically, and usually it rolls around Link's Shadow because Demon Toad's a Link Shadow monster. Anyway, so let's take a look at the new monsters from this year. The first one is Elfin Dragon Lilla. This one I covered. That's the word I was looking for. I covered it in the fire video at the beginning when I went through the cycles. It only works with the other Elfin Dragons, so there's no point covering it here. This one is definitely not worth building around, really. It's one of the slower sweepers. But yeah, anyway, that's that one. I actually gave it a fair bit of love in the fire video, so yeah, you can go watch that there. So the first one we're actually going to talk about is Shiny Gear Croc. Now this one is actually pretty interesting. So normal Gear Croc, the big deal about it, like what it does, is it has Auto Protect with Stun Absorb. So it's a stun protection which they can't really ignore, because if they stun it, you know, most stun absorbers, if you stun them, you can just ignore them. You can leave them out of play, and it's basically, you know, there's one dead monster on the enemy, one dead weight monster on the enemy team, so it's become a 4v3. It's kind of like the whole problem with stun absorbers, really. But Gear Croc made that a lot better because it has Auto Protect. So if it's stunned out of play, well, it's likely they've still got to hit it and kill it before they can kill the other monsters. So it was always, in the older days, a really good source of stun protection. It was a monster that I wanted for ages and I just never managed to get my hands on. Anyway, so this still has that as part of it, except it's changed Stun Absorb to Stun Martyr, which I would say on most monsters is better, because then it doesn't get stunned and left out of play the same way that stun absorbers do, because it just removes itself. So basically it dies to cancel whatever stun happened on your team. You know, that's kind of what happens. But the whole idea of Gear Croc was that it would stay there, but it would be, you know, still redirecting attacks to it with the Auto Protect. So that is basically a downgrade to make it Stun Martyr rather than Stun Absorb, which is a bit of a shame, but the moveset is a lot stronger. So rather than having this, you know, really slow knockback, it has random knockback that is faster. It does hit a random enemy, but it's pretty fast, and probably, you know, in situation you can use it. Actually, you know, as I'm saying that there, it's probably not as good as the normal knockback, especially because it's an Auto Protect. But the big deal about this basically is that it has Blood Crave. So you can use either Sudden Death to charge the Blood Crave, or you can hit something on whole ground, that kind of thing. It means that this is slightly more viable than some other protectors these days, because protectors can be bypassed. And so if your protector doesn't do anything when it's out on the battlefield, or, you know, say it's the normal Gear Croc and you do a knockback, which is really slow move and stuff, and then it doesn't do anything else, that is not so great. But if you can, charge a blood move on it, then it can be doing a lot more on the battlefield. So it's interesting. I've seen people use it. It plays relatively well, but it's nothing too crazy. So I like the design. I think it's cool. I think it's a nice spin on the original Gear Croc, except giving it Stun Martyr is a bit weird, because it, you know, it's kind of better with Stun Absorb. But anyway, you win some, you lose some. I think it's basically about as strong as the original Gear Croc, to be honest. Yeah, let's move on. So the next monster is Rabbit. Now this is, first of all, kind of a funny pun on the rabbit name. But this, I love what's going on here. I just think it's a little bit underpowered. And it's the issue of being a super epic, really, that they just couldn't push it too hard. I mean, some super epics we've seen this year have been really, really strong. And they could have made this a lot stronger. maybe, but it's a super epic, so you can't expect too much. So the cool thing about it is it has Link Stealth All. If that was 70 seconds, like it is on Legendaries, it would make this monster way, way better. But it's 100 seconds, which is a bit too slow. Then it's got Devious Attack, which looks a bit crazy being 200 seconds. I think, to be honest, it could be 160. It's basically Sneak Attack, but Rabbit doesn't need to be stealthed. Just any one of your team needs to be stealthed. And the important thing here, the bit that kind of means that it has to be so slow, is that if you use Rabbit with a camouflage monster, it's just automatically charged. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to make it, Sneak Attack's 130 seconds. If they made it 130 seconds too, it would just be way too easy to pull that off and to be sweeping really nicely. But I think 160 probably would have been fairer. At 200 seconds, that is a bit too slow. And so those two moves, you can see, they're just both a bit too slow, which means that this is a bit underpowered overall. Assisted Dusk, obviously, that's fine. It's full attack. Alright, it will do some damage. Assassinate, not the strongest move, but it is full attack, so that will be decent enough. So, it's got fine damage moves, but nothing is quite strong enough. It's all a little bit too slow, or not going to be high enough impact with the power. So that's kind of, unfortunately, where it sits. It doesn't stealth on entrance, which most of these kind of monsters have stealthy entrance, which is interesting that it doesn't have that. Instead, it poisons a random enemy, and it itself is poison immune. Poison immune is great for stealth stuff, so it means it's going to keep its stealth better. Poison Gambit basically means it's got a poison weakness. That Poison Gambit's not going to help really. It's just going to make it, have weakness to Toxic Killer. So I think it's a little bit underpowered overall. If they push a little bit more, it would have been able to support a Link Shadow stealth stuff, which, if you remember me years ago saying, I love my Zulong and Tenebris, and I would love to have, stealth properly supported in Shadow, and then they've just brought nothing. They made it be a water type thing, and this could have brought Shadow stealth stuff back again, but they made it a little bit too weak. But anyway, so slightly disappointed in this monster, but it's fine. As a newer player, it would be good, especially because lots of people can play Shadow when they first start playing the game. So, having stealth is really good in PvE. So next we have another shiny monster. This is shiny Searguard. Now, Searguard was historically one of the top super epics in the game for PvP, and it's always been very strong. It's now not quite as strong as it used to be, just because people rely slightly less on chrono monsters. It used to be all the key monsters, all the best monsters pretty much were chrono monsters, and so it would come in and be able to kill that and then do Blood Crave and stuff. But now, these days, it's a bit too squishy. You sometimes don't meet the chrono monsters, that kind of stuff. So it's still good, but people usually use it just to kind of set up stun lock or something like that. This shiny Searguard, therefore, doesn't really have the same role, because it doesn't hit chrono monsters. Instead, it hits poison monsters. And so it's kind of meta dependent. You use it when there's a lot of poison around. And there, I would say it's a bit weak. Toxic Killer's a weaker move than Chrono Killer by about 20%. So the Chrono Killer did enough to kill most things. I think Toxic Killer, it will only kill certain poison monsters and not others. I can't remember the exact damage and how much it will do, which it will kill, which it won't. But basically, it's a tiny bit weak. And obviously you need that to get the kill to then do Blood Crave. The upside is that this Searguard has stun immunity, so for PvP it's a little bit more reliable. You don't have to protect it so much, because protection from stun is kind of very important in PvP. So you can't just run too many monsters that are stunnable, because you can then just get really punished by stun. So it more easily slots into a team. But I do think it's meta dependent, so you have to use it when there are lots of poison monsters around, and then you can use it to be a stun immune sweeper. One thing that's interesting to note about monsters like this, especially because this has got roaring entrance, you can set it up with making tokens in the enemy team. So, there are various tokens you can make, like bronze shells, rocks. You can make little views, box chomp, not box chomp, box jaws. You can make those kind of things to then plan to kill them with Searguard. So Searguard can come in, and then if they're not playing poison at all, you can kill the token with this to still charge Bloodcrave. And you can kind of have that plan, built into your team, where you're thinking, okay, I'm normally going to use these bronze shells to slow them down, disrupt them, but if there isn't a target for Searguard, I can use one of those to get Searguard a kill. So I think there's some potential with that kind of thing. And in that case, it is a stun immune sweeper that you can use. It's just very squishy. But yeah, that kind of thing. So there's some potential. It's why I put it as S in PvP, because I think compared to a lot of other super epics, it can fit very well. If everything goes well, it will do really well. If everything falls flat, it will be a bit disappointing, but that's kind of the case with a lot of super epics. So being S, I think, is kind of fair, but maybe it's a little bit worse than the other Searguard, and it should be slightly lower. Last for the super epics, we have Wopadoom. Now this is like a demon bunny goat thing. I can't remember what it's from exactly, but it's I believe from some kind of mythology somewhere. Maybe someone in the comments can enlighten us all with that. So this was pretty terrible when it came out, and they buffed it afterwards. It's a mark monster that doesn't have like a mark killing move, and it clones itself, but in a weird way. I mean, let's just start talking about it really. So it's low speed with reasonable defense. That's, nothing special, but kind of, it's a clone monster, so it probably should be slow. Then it has Union Attack. Now that's the important thing. They added Union Attack to this later on, which I think makes it quite a bit better. That Union Attack is on the edge of being strong enough. It does reasonable damage, but nothing too crazy, so it will one-shot squishier things, but not the tankier things, which is kind of fine. Union Attack is a fast move, so basically it will kind of do the job if you have the Union Attack set up. And then other than that, it can random clone, which will put another copy of it at a random point in the team. It doesn't have any entrance, but it does have Poisonal Revenge. So that means it can kind of support poison throughout your team. But it's not going to do too much. It's going to slow down your team wherever it enters, because it doesn't do a whole lot when it enters. And then otherwise, it has the mark protection, so good little set of passives. That will mean that it's kind of, you don't have to protect it too much in your team, and then it can mark enemies, and when they're marked, it can then death sentence them. So the death sentence thing is good-ish. Like, it's a 100-second move, and it does kill them even if Wopadoom dies. However, it takes 200 seconds to do it. So, putting this together, it's low speed, then you come in, you mark something, then you mark curse it, then 200 seconds later it dies. That's a long time to wait, and that's the only way it can kill things other than Union Attack. The random cloning as well is because this monster's not as good as other ones, it's going to be a bit awkward when it comes in to then do all that stuff again, with the marking and the mark curse stuff, and if you've got a bunch of them, you can Union Attack, but they're too slow that you wouldn't really get a bunch of them. It has some poison support, so it's a bit of a weird monster that mixes a bunch of things, but doesn't do anything exceptionally well. So it kind of supports poison, it supports mark, and it wants to do Demon Union. I mean, maybe this will slot into a team at some point, but to be honest, I don't think it does enough with any of these things. And cloning super epics that are kind of underpowered is just a recipe for losing. You're just going to slow your team down way too much that it won't function, and you just won't do enough. So yeah, I've got this low. I don't think it's that great. I think that Union Attack was a great boost to it after it came out, but ultimately it's just a bit underpowered. Moving on to Legendaries, the first Legendary we've got to talk about is Shiny Aura Dragon. Now this was a really big hit, I think. When I say big hit, I'm not saying it's super powerful, I'm just really happy about it. And for that, I've really got to go into some detail about original Aura Dragon. So when Aura Dragon first came out, it was terrible. It was really, really bad, and it got then multiple buffs and became the amazing godlike creature that it is today. So originally it was a throw monster, And the idea of the reincarnation, it was like 30% chance of reincarnation when a teammate died, 30% chance you got it at the back at 1 HP, and then it had throw. So the idea was, as things died off, they then became throw fodder, to use the throw move. Except it was interesting in that you then had the choice of like, okay, do I want to throw this thing, or actually do I want to keep it because it will be useful at the back of the team? The problem was, the damage from Aura Dragon using throw wasn't really high enough. The attack stat was just a bit too low. Also, the 30% chance was too low. So, you can't really build around it. Having like Death Revenge monsters and that kind of stuff, like things that have value, whether or not they have 1 HP or 100% HP, that wasn't worth doing because it was only a 30% chance of coming. And then also because you were going to throw them, it was like, well, if you invested all that building around it and hoping to get them at the back of the team, well, then you don't really want to throw them because they're useful monsters at the back of the team. So it didn't really function well enough. So instead they changed it to just be full support, and they made it be like it was 30% increased up to 40%, and then they just went, screw it, let's make it 100%. That I think was a mistake. I think it probably should be like 50%. And then it would be like a really strong monster. But right now it's one of the best monsters with PvE because it's just so powerful, and it's even strong enough for PvP use, really. So they pushed it too hard, and so Shiny Aura Dragon is like a big throwback to the original Aura Dragon. So this is their 2022 version of the original Aura Dragon, fixing some of the problems. So the first thing is it's got full attack stats. So it can kill enemies much easier. Link Double Catapult is not the strongest move, so it doesn't actually kill Mythics, and I can't remember the exact damage from it, but basically it's not super impressive with the damage. It's good, but it's not kind of like just one shot anything, even though this has full attack stats. But that's fine. You don't really want it to be so crazily oppressive. We've already got Kuromasa in the game, and this doesn't need to be another Kuromasa, really. So it does that with the damage, and then the way it reincarnates things is the kind of the opposite of normal Aura Dragon. So Aura Dragon is, when your teammates die, you get them at the back. This is when your enemies, the enemy monsters die, then you get it at the back. However, it's only from kills that the shiny Aura Dragon does, not from your teammates. Because if it was from teammates too, it would be a bit ridiculous. Then this would just be like a high priority must kill target, because if you don't kill it, they're just going to basically get your team at the back of their team, and it would be way too strong. So I think they did a great balanced job of making this be a proper twist on the original, what the original Aura Dragon should have been. Also, bear in mind, you can only use one of these in your team. So this is strong. Actually, I was going to say it's strong in PvE. I've got it low in PvE. I've heard from some friends that it is actually good in PvE. I think the damage is just a bit too low or something. And one of the problems that I can't ignore is that normal Aura Dragon is so good, and you can only use one of them in your team. Why would you pick this over the normal one? Like, the normal one's just so good. So yeah, I know. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on the second from bottom tier list rating in PvE, but for PvP it's quite cool. The issue that I have with it is that it requires Link Shadow, and it sort of doesn't always do enough damage. It's also a bit slow. There's no other protection stuff on it other than hold ground, so it's not ideal. But I do think it's very cool, and it certainly does the job. It's just there are stronger monsters. This doesn't pull you into Link Shadow. It's just if you're in Link Shadow, this is a monster you could put in the team. That's how I kind of feel about it. Giving turn to it multiple times obviously does work well, because you can Link Double Catapult multiple times. Also, I've heard people complain a bit, but then other ones sort of be more understanding, that it does have the issue of the original Aura Dragon, in that when you kill enemies, they get reincarnated at the back. And then if you want to attack again, you have to sacrifice them at the back. So there is a bit of an issue there. You have to balance it. You have to look at what's back there and be like, okay, do I want to sacrifice that thing for killing 2 enemies on the battlefield now and reincarnating them instead? you have to just basically make that decision in the battle. I feel like most of the time it will be worth it because you get 2 for 1, so you're kind of generally trading up. Plus, also you're killing 2 enemies, so probably it just pays off. I don't think you can choose the order either way either. So like when you kill 2 enemies, they both get put at the back. You don't get to choose which way round they are, and obviously you're going to sacrifice the one that's at the back, and the other one will stay there. Yeah, but anyway. Very cool monster. I think it's such a fun play on the original Aura Dragon, a throwback to what it was like, and they did some really cool stuff with this. I love the design of it. Unfortunately, it's not like the craziest monster, and you have to use it in Link Shadow. Oh, actually, saying that, that's actually why I have it low in PvE, because I sort of push down Link monsters quite a bit, because they require a certain team building, and for PvE, the tier list is kind of like assuming that you don't have like every monster available to you. So, you want to make a strong PvE team, you don't necessarily have all the pieces to make a strong Link Shadow PvE team. So yeah, anyway, that's this monster. Very cool. I love it a lot. It's just nothing too crazy. The next legendary is Doomahoof. Now this one is very interesting, but I don't think it's that strong. I have it the same tier ratings as the Shiny War Dragon we just saw. So there's a lot of text on these moves. It's a bit complicated to read. Trying to break it down. The passives are quite interesting. They don't necessarily synergize with the moveset, but they definitely can impact the battle. So you have Gravity Field. I would love to see Gravity Field on more monsters, to be honest. I think it's a really cool passive that's very useful. Can make some very strong setups. Maybe they have to be a bit careful about where they put it, but Gravity Field's good passive. And then Insomnia, so you just randomly counter sleep stuff, which is great. The secret skill is really, really strong. This is a lot stronger than you would expect. Normal element retribution isn't that powerful, but this instant element retribution, which I can't get my words out, if there's 3 enemies of the same element, it will one-shot them, basically. I think that's pretty much the case. If they're super tanky and stuff, then maybe not. But it doesn't take them being a Link team for it to become really good. I think even with 2 monsters of the same element, it will do good damage against them. So that's pretty cool. It's a little bit high speed for triggering Retribution, and it needs Retribution for 2 of its moves. That is, a teammate dying off while it's on the battlefield. So it's a little bit awkward, but it's kind of it can happen. But yeah, that's where this monster falls a little bit short, I would say. So in terms of the other moves, we've got Payback Killer, great move to have if you don't rely on it too much. We've got Bloodshed, so it needs 3 kills. To be honest, Bloodshed after 2 kills does good damage, so you probably only need 2 kills on this monster. And then it can remove any tokens extremely quickly. And then it's got Vengeful Bash, which is basically Retribution plus Slayerbane. So a teammate has to die, and then you can kill an enemy with a kill. So you Slayerbane something, but only every time a teammate dies. And that can get around Protectors as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this monster, really. Also, interestingly, on release, if you used either Vengeful Bash or Instant Element Retribution, then it disabled the other move. So you had to wait until another teammate died before you could use the other one. I thought this was a bit unintuitive and a bit confusing. The developers disagreed, and then about a month later they changed it anyway. So I think they changed their mind and they did agree. It's a little bit confusing. So now if a teammate dies, you can Instant Element Retribution followed up by a Vengeful Bash, which is very cool, very powerful, and that's where you can get kills. So the issue here is that Payback Killer and Weed Out are both quite situational. Getting rid of tokens, getting rid of Death Revenge, great stuff to have in PvP, but doesn't always come up. And then you've got the other 2 moves. You have to have had a teammate die, and this is quite high speed. So often by the first turn, that hasn't happened. And then, basically you've got to just pass time by using a Bloodshed randomly. And then they can kill it off before it gets its next turn. So I think it doesn't line up super well. Sometimes, though, it will line up well. But you don't really get the the sort of flow of moves that you get on some other monsters, where they do a move, they get a kill, then they can do their blood move, and it all lines up. With Doomhoof, say it comes in, you do lose a teammate, so then it's instant element retribution and vengeful bash are triggered. However, it can't get a kill with instant element retribution, so you can use that, do some damage to things, but otherwise vengeful bash, grab a kill. And then when it gets its next turn, something hasn't died in that 50 seconds, because 50 seconds is quite a small window. Then what does it do? Well, it has one kill, it can bloodshed with one kill, do some damage. And basically the design of it is the enemy team can't ignore this. It's going to really punish them if they ignore it, because it will keep doing vengeful bash. However, it also gives them windows to kind of kill other monsters and then come and deal with this. So it doesn't really punish them super hard. If it had, say, a 70-second move, say it wasn't bloodshed, say it was some other blood move and it requires 4 kills, but it's 70 seconds. If it had that, it could probably do a lot better, because it would be able to pass time, smaller windows of time, and then punish with a vengeful bash in between. But as it is, I think it doesn't quite line up too well. But obviously, in a meta with Death Revenge a lot and token disruption and stuff, it can do really well. It can also very heavily punish link teams. As I said, if something has died when this gets a turn, using the instant element retribution followed up by vengeful bash can do a lot to the enemy team. So yeah, there's cool stuff here. I like the concept of it. I just think that the design doesn't quite do well enough. This could have been an extremely powerful top PvP monster, but as it is, it struggles a little bit too much, that it's more kind of like a mediocre filler kind of monster. So yeah, let's move on to the next one, which is Shadow LM Fox. So we talked about the holy version of LM Fox in the holy video. Okay, I'm really struggling. Let me reset on that. We talk about Shadow LM Fox. This one is the version that is super, super strong. I've got it as S in PvP. It's a very similar idea to the Holy version, where now, rather than teaming it up with a Shadow teammate for the stats buff, you team it up with a Holy teammate. And the stats buff it gets is crazy. It gets double attack and double defense. So even though this has full attack stats, so it has the minimum defense, that being doubled means that it has more than full defense stats. Normally full defense on a legendary is 5,850 defense. This one is going to be double 3,375, which is 7,750. 6,750. 6,750 is about 1,000 more than the full defense. It's more. This tanks super well. And then its attack is crazy. So Thundering Strike basically nearly one-shots. Frozen Punch does more than 1,000 damage. It does 1,500 damage or something like that. Stone Missile, it kind of one-shot anyway, but actually I think it's slightly weak. I think it's a slightly weak catapult. It doesn't one-shot the higher HP things like Mythics, but with the stats buff it does. So like with the Holy one, you want to use this with something that gives us the stats buff more than anything else. But when you do, it's really tanky with hold ground, with poison immunity, and all its moves do really, high damage, powerful things. So you've got a piercing move with Stone Missile, with an Earth Monster. You've got a normal, damage move with the Fire one. That's kind of the general go-to. You want to use this basically with Holy and Fire, and then you do that. And then the really strong one is the Storm one, stunning an enemy. It does mean that LM Fox has stun killer weakness, but this stun move is very, very good because it nearly one-shots, one-shot squishier things, and it stuns for 200 seconds, and it's only a 100-second move. So on top of this monster being stupidly tanky, having really good damage moves, it can also do stun control, stunning enemies out of play. You can stun 2 enemies out of play, or one of the cool things you can do is say there's an enemy with hold ground, and they have a stun absorber. You hit the enemy with hold ground with Thundering Strike, put it to hold ground, and then because it didn't die, the stun still happens, so then it will stun the stun absorber. Stuff like that you can do. Frozen Punch also slows something down a lot. I just want to see, is that for the next turn? No, it's permanent. It's a permanent slow, increasing the seconds by 50%. Really slows the enemy. So yeah, all the moves on this are very strong. As you use it, you basically just need a holy teammate, hope to have like a fire teammate, and then you'll get the moves kind of activated by what the enemy team have. Another thing you can do is give the enemy team bronze shells. So then you don't have to use a fire teammate. You just give them some bronze shells from something else. In your general setup, you're giving them bronze shells. Use this with the Holy Monster, and then Flaming Blaze is most likely going to be, available when it happens. If they bring out someday, they may give us some kind of holy tokens that you can give to opponents, and then that will be another way for setting this up, is giving them holy tokens, and then it will have the stats buff very easily from that. I just realised the next monster we're going to look at gives a holy token. So I can't remember what the other monster now was that I mentioned that was like, oh, if we ever get holy tokens, this monster will become good. I can't remember which one it is. I'll have to figure that one out. Maybe I'll put it in the description, but I'll probably forget. But anyway, so this monster's incredibly powerful, very viable in PvP. In PvE, it's also pretty good. I don't know if I need to reassess that B in general. Maybe I didn't actually move that after the stats buff stuff. But anyway, very, very strong monster. Gives you control, gives you sweeping, super tanky. It's the kind of stuff that we get nowadays that I would say is pushing power creep. We've got some really strong legendaries this year, and this is one of them that is just like really outclasses a lot of the older monsters that we have. So the monster I was just referring to is Lady Faith. Now, after I heard this being called Lady Faith, I can't stop thinking Lady Faith when I read it. The name of it is actually Life Death, kind of with the letters mixed in together. And it's the same on the lower forms. It's like light, dark, and that kind of stuff. So life and death are actually the internal names for holy and shadow. So it's it's a play on that, which most people wouldn't know when they read it. So this first off, the artwork. I heard a lot of criticism about this artwork when it came out, and to be honest, I agree. I think it probably could have been better. One of the comments that I heard that was very harsh, but I do think rings true a bit, is that this looks like the kind of way that if you told like a 10-year-old boy draw a dragon of combining yin and yang, they would draw this. It doesn't have any detail. The dragon itself is not that not that special. I wish they did a bit more with the artwork here. But that said, we have so many monsters which I love the artwork of them. Not the waifu, but the monsters. I really love the artwork on them. That the occasional miss, I think, is perfectly fine. And I think it's important for that reason to give feedback sometimes when it's like, I think this monster could have been a bit better. I wish they did a bit more with the artwork here. So yeah, that aside, what makes this monster very strong, very, very strong, is the secret skill. It has quite high speed, surprisingly high speed for then doing something like the secret skill, which is knocking back an enemy and then giving them a yang, which is the holy one of the yin yang. And that is a monster that can't get rid of itself. So it gives them this monster which is then just permanent dead weight in their team. They need to be able to kill it off with something. It has link moves, so all it can do, unless they happen to be link holy, is just do Kinslayer. And the Kinslayer is really weak as well. I think against an Angel Lion, which is not a particularly tanky holy monster, it 3-shots. So that takes it's 130 seconds each time. It's obviously not a +9 or anything. It's like the basic +0. So it's the full 130 seconds every time. Has to use that 3 times. That's 260 seconds to do those. Basically it's not doing anything what's on the battlefield. They have to kill it off. That's pretty crazy, especially considering you actually push a monster back to do that move. So it can set up stuff on your team. There'll be an enemy at any particular moment, you're like, that is the problem enemy, I need to deal with that. You're not taking time out to make this token. You're going, okay, that enemy needs to go back, and it's only 50 seconds to do that kind of disruption. Pretty crazy. This monster is a must-kill threat when you see it, because it's got that move. Also, the rest of the moveset is very strong. So just covering the passives, first of all. Light accuracy, meaning that the moves can't be redirected. That doesn't really matter too much. And also, it's a bit unintuitive because if using this with holy monsters, then the Kinslayer can do damage to your team. But like I said, the Kinslayer is actually very weak. I would say that light accuracy is not very important because the moves don't really require bypassing protectors, except for the secret skill. So I think it's fair to say that if you're using this in like the front line and you're planning to use that secret skill on something, having a holy monster around is pretty useful for then getting rid of the enemy that you want, even if they have a protector. But other than that, I don't think it's much use having light accuracy triggered. Using this with a shadow monster, however, is very important. This generally, as a monster, supports holy and shadow, so you do want to be using it with those monsters. But yeah, using it with shadow in particular because it then gives it piercing. So then this defang becomes very good. Otherwise, the defang is pretty weak. Also, the yin yang strike, it's 160 seconds. Very much needs to be 160 seconds. You know, we've got Kinslayer at 130. Counter-Strike is 100. But this, because it's often piercing, and it hits two different elements. There's a lot of monsters this hits, so they just need to have one monster in their team being Holy or Shadow, and then it can like basically pierce and kill that and one other every 100, in 160 seconds, which is very strong. Other than that, it has Purify, which obviously is very useful to have. I am very happy they put Purify on this monster. They have been, since I talked to them about a couple of years ago, and I don't want to take full credit for it, it was, their side too. But a couple of years ago, I was talking to them and I was like, please put Purify on more monsters. Just randomly slip it onto a monster if it can fit with the rest of the moveset. Within it, as in, like, they don't need that fourth move in order for the moveset to function. Then please make that fourth move Purify. And yeah, they've been doing that on more monsters, and Lady Faith has that on it, which is excellent. And then it has a really awesome move, Yin Yang Accelerate, to do, like, these all say 25%, but it's actually 26% accelerate on all Holy and Shadow teammates. So this is the first NM Accelerate for Holy monsters that we have in the game, which is pretty damn cool. But like I said, funnily enough, you want to use it with Shadow monsters. But anyway, so this can make any kind of like Shadow or maybe mixture of Holy and Shadow team exceptionally strong, while also heavily disrupting the enemy team, and then being probably a pretty good sweeper. If you have this alongside other sweepers, you can then be killing off the non-Holy or Shadow monsters with your teammates to then make sure this can keep finding targets. It's a very strong monster. I really like this, especially because this is the kind of monster that can make Link Shadow viable. And honestly, before this monster came out, I very rarely saw Link Shadow. I usually saw it being AoE spam, and that was, kind of a fine team, but like nothing too crazy. And then occasionally you'd meet someone using a bunch of Shadow monsters together, being some kind of Link setup. And it wasn't too strong. It was like, it's kind of playable, but I can't see them doing too well with that. Since Lady Faith, I have seen more Link Shadow teams that have been much stronger teams. I think it makes it a much stronger setup. With Lunactia, there's now like quite a few Shadow monsters which are kind of up there as like top PvP monsters. And there's enough now that you can kind of just, jam those monsters together and it will work really well. So seeing Lady Faith with Lunactia has worked out pretty nicely. Those are both monsters which are relatively high speed and can disrupt the enemy team. So this does, Yin Yang Substitute, and then Lunactia does enemy substitute, and then you've really kind of like, taken over the battlefield. You can use the Yin Yang Accelerate and then kind of control things from there. So that's something which Shadow just hasn't been able to do before, and this really helps that kind of strategy work. Pretty cool monster. I like it a lot. Let's move on. So the first mythic to talk about here is Akane. This was massively hyped on release, and then I was a bit down on it. However, I was very iffy because it's the kind of monster that I can definitely see doing better than I'd expect. So I've currently got it about average in PvP. It's in B tier, which is literally the middle tier. But I could definitely see this being better. One of the main reasons is that it doesn't require any particular situational type stuff going on. Its damage is not a killer move or, something like that, or like a blood move that you need to charge, this sets itself up and it just repeatedly does good damage. So what this does is basically it's a throw monster that will come in, do throw all a couple of times, and then move itself, take itself out of the battlefield, come back in, do throw all a couple of times, and each time it creates a couple of rockets at the back. So it just does that loop, and because it's got decent speed, throw all is a really fast move, it does this loop pretty quickly. I can't remember how long it takes to get a turn. I can work it out pretty quickly. Would be 34, it's reduced by 20%, so it's about 7, so 27 plus 35, and then you get the 85% of that. It's about just under 50 seconds, I believe. And then it can do the throw move, which is 42 seconds, so that's like 90 seconds. And then you do throw all again, 130 seconds, and then it pulls itself back and does that loop. So it's every 130 seconds it gets to do this loop, and that loop will kill all the enemies. So pretty cool. Gets countered by camouflage, obviously, but for a standalone monster, this has a lot of sweeping power. If it can't do that kind of setup, then it won't work so well, but to be honest, there's not too many things that would disrupt it. It can also remove tokens very nicely, so instant backbite is excellent for that. It's also got recycle, so this is an interesting move. It has an extra restriction which is not written on there. I don't know exactly how they would choose to word it, but it's something along the lines of if the next monster in line is the same as the monster which you're removing, or maybe it's that if every monster in the rest of your team is a token monster, then you can't use recycle, something like that, to basically stop you from being at the end of the team and like all you have left is rockoids, and then you just go like recycle, 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 and because it's an instant move and unlimited use, you could use that until the enemy team just gives up. So to stop abuse of that, there is a restriction in place there. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something along the lines of if everything left in your team is a token monster, you can't use recycle. But anyway, so this counters token disruption really nicely, and has this loop, as I say. Otherwise, you want to use it with dragons, because when it enters, it halves the HP of everything on the battlefield other than dragons. So if you're not using dragons, it's going to affect your side of the battlefield too. But if you are using dragons, well then it's just going to be a one-sided type thing. There are a lot of dragons in the game, so it won't affect some of your enemies, but most of them it will, and that means that then the throw can kill them off much better. So the thing that got overhyped about this monster is that people assumed that throw damage was amazing. It's not. Throw damage is relatively weak. It's kind of like a hit-all. So for that reason, if it didn't halve the HP of all the enemies, then the throw would not be enough. Like, it would need to be doing multiple throw-alls. But with them halved, then it will kill them off in 2 throw-alls. So the squishier monsters will die after 1, but the tankier ones take 2. Where this comes in really nicely is, I mentioned at the beginning, the AoE spam sub-theme in Shadow. This can support it very well. So if you're hitting all the enemies and reducing their HP with other monsters, like, say, Nova Drake, who happens to be a dragon, then this combines with it to be really effective for taking down the enemies with this AoE stuff. So, one assisted Dusk, then you've got the throw all as well, maybe the entrance and stuff. You can just, like, clear out the enemies really, really quickly like that. Now, in terms of, like, how well that actually works in practice, because you've got to protect them from stun and allow it kind of like deal with camouflage monsters and other stuff like that. And you've got the restriction of like you need to probably be using dragons. It does make it a little bit more complicated to build around. I haven't seen Akane used that much. When she came out, I saw her used a bit. Then people stopped using her, so I don't know what people's opinion is of Akane. But I think there's some great potential here because of the way she just sets herself up and doesn't ask for too much, and has potentially crazy sweeping power. But yeah, cool monster. I really like the design of this one. We haven't really seen anything like this in the game, and it's something that isn't too crazy and gimmicky and difficult. This is actually like a very viable design, and I think in the future should be very good. The next mythic is Atlantia. Now this one, I won't spend too long talking about it. I don't think it's that great. In fact, the A that I put for PvE is not actually where I should put it. I made a mistake. It should be lower than that. Her gimmick is that she plays with the whole Death Revenge stuff, which I think is really, really cool because, you know, I've said it's a theme in Shadow that they have this death sentence stuff. I may have said Death Revenge, I meant Death Sentence. It's kind of a big thing that Shadow does. And so having a monster that interacts with it is really cool. The problem is it just doesn't do it very well. So she can like hit all enemies quickly to death sentence them all, because anything she touches gets death sentence. The problem is the death sentence is really quite slow, and she still needs to be on the battlefield as well. That's the big problem. You know, like if she could hit all enemies and then make them die off after 300 seconds, whether or not she was alive, then that would make her really good. You know, we talked about that last year with Dolphin. I think it's called Dolphin, the storm dolphin, that when it dies, it death sentences all the enemies. That works actually really quite nicely. But yeah, because she has to still be on the battlefield, it just doesn't work well enough. She's got Hardened Carapace and she can heal herself up with Backbite, but it's not really, you know, enough to make that work. The main gimmicky thing about her is early trigger, so a death sentence thing she can just instantly kill. Why I put this really high in PvE is because I forgot later I thought it would trigger any curse stuff. So if, say, you use Chrono Titan, you bomb curse something, and then use early trigger, I thought it would trigger the bomb to then explode and kill the other enemies. However, it does not. Like, any kind of death sentence type thing, whatever kind of sentence it is, it will just kill that one enemy when she uses early trigger. It doesn't trigger the death sentence, it just kills that enemy, basically. Which I suppose actually the wording could have been a little bit more intuitive. But anyway, so because of that, there's not really much that you want to do with her. She doesn't have great synergy with things, even though, you know, she can trigger that death sentence stuff. I think they should have made early trigger faster and made her need like 2 kills or something for the blood move or something like that. You know, does something slightly differently, because as it stands, basically she's a tanky monster with Hardened Carapace, and then when she gets a turn, you want to Backbite and then just Blood Bite, rather than using the early trigger, which is really sad because early trigger is like the actual unique thing about her. But yeah, that's kind of how she is, and other monsters are just better than that. So yeah, if they redesign her, she could become really cool and really good, but she's not good enough. Which is completely the opposite to Carmilla here. So Carmilla is the strongest monster that's come out this year by a fair way. She is, without a doubt in my mind, the strongest monster in the game. If you want to go for any one particular monster and you want to ask, like, okay, what's the best monster for PvP? What's the best monster for PvE? Well, this is just best at everything. This is so unbelievably overpowered. And I know it's become a really, really contentious point in the community because a lot of people own her and they don't want her nerfed. And so it tends to strike some arguments when people are trying to claim she does not need nerfing. However, there are so many things on paper, and when you see her in practice, that are ridiculously good. So I'm just going to take my time here and talk about it, because what makes her so crazy more than anything else is that she has perfect stance and then Blood Drain at only 50 seconds. Blood Drain fully heals her. It does enough damage that then, basically it does about 500, 600, something like that. So it fully heals her at just 50 seconds, and then when she's on max HP, well, above 90%, she has this crazy defense buff. So what it does is it gives you the defense cap, but also an 80% damage reduction to all damage. In the second form, it's 60%. It's a slightly different version of Perfect Stance. It's like Vigorous Stance or something. And so in order to get her below that 90% HP, it takes an enormous amount of damage. It's more than the normal critical damage that you get from things. So a blood move can get her below 90%. However, if you use like, Slayer Bane, Confident Strike, bunch of other things, that do good damage, but not, normal kind of one-shot damage, not crazy damage, those don't even get her below 90% HP. you have to use 2 of those to get her below 90%, and then you can hit her normally to kill her. And well, that takes like what, two high damage critical moves, two critical moves plus then a third one to kill her, and all of that you somehow have to fit in between her attacking. And wait, hold on, she's got a 50-second heal. How the hell do you do that? It's just ridiculous. If she's actually going to get turns, you can't kill her. Like, you need to either disable her, or you need to get her in the window between her like Vigor Blood Bites or Dual Confidence Strikes. But she is just one of your 4 monsters on the battlefield. So when you're using her, yes, there will be a window in between her attacks, but you can plan ahead by looking at what your team can do and stuff, and what the enemy team, which ones of them are going to get turns, to pretty much make her impossible to kill. Now, obviously, this is me all talking in paper, and in practice things can line up slightly differently. You've also got, sleep and stun and various ways to disable her, but a lot of the time it does play out the way I'm saying, and with her behind protectors or just used alongside really strong like other mythics and stuff, she's ridiculous. She does get one shot by Payback Killer. Payback Killer is the one proper counter to her, and we do have more Payback Killer monsters in the game now. There's also Piercing from a lot of mythics. That was something I was saying for Gabrielle in the last video, is that her shield, if she has it, that constant shield, actually gets countered by a lot of mythics who have Piercing. That is true for Carmilla too. Piercing gets around the defense buff, which means she's not then impossible to kill. However, even if you do kill her, she has Death Revenge, so she just randomly gets a kill. It's like they could have stopped at so many different points in this design to like hold her back, make her more balanced, but they went overkill on every single level. That she just like she has ridiculous defense, can heal up stupidly fast. She can unconditionally get kills right from her first turn, picking what she kills. And then even if you manage to kill her in any way, like deal with her properly, well then she kills one of your monsters anyway because of Death Revenge. Like, the only way you can properly counter her is with Payback Killer. That's the only thing in the game that can actually like counter her. Otherwise, you've got to deal with it in another like more difficult way. And yeah, it's just honestly so ridiculous. There's a number of things they could do to nerf her, to make her more balanced while she's still very strong. If they made Blood Drain 70 seconds, that would be great. If they made the Vigor Heartburst instead be normal Heartburst, but they changed the way Heartburst works, so you have to Blood Drain something first. That's my idea, is like I want Blood Drain to become Life Bite, and Love Bite or something. And she's a vampire. Like, this is also I should say, with the artwork, I actually don't mind the artwork here because she's a vampire, and vampires are often like seductive and type stuff. So I think it works. The lolly though is ridiculous. Like, they didn't need the lolly. So if it was Love Bite and that was 70 seconds, and then you have to Love Bite something first before you can Heartburst it, then it would stop her from just being like guaranteed to kill on what you want. And it also then means that before she gets that first turn, if you hit her, she could still use Dual Confidence Strike, but it's not going to be the full power Confidence Strike, because she won't be on 100% HP. So then there's a bit more kind of like interplay, a bit of interaction that you can actually do to try and stop her. As it is, there's so much you have to throw at her, and then she can just still heal up, Vigor Heartburst, get something. She only needs one kill, then she can Vigor Blood Bite, which heals her every time she gets a kill. It's just insane. And you don't need the secret skill at all. She's 17 cost, plus 3 cost to put the secret skill on, but you don't even need that. And it gives her a Sleep Killer weakness as well, which is kind of a negative. So most teams, you can just use her without that. But it does also push Link Shadow. If you're using Link Shadow, use the strongest monster in the game, go ahead. And it's even like when it gets a turn, then it can put one enemy to sleep and kill another one. Just completely take over a battle. And then from there, like they're going to have less monsters to actually deal with her. So she's going to survive better with Blood Drain as well. Yeah, absolutely nuts. And if we're talking PvE, she's got so many good things for PvE. The Death Revenge works very well. Getting a guaranteed kill, doesn't matter if they're buffed. Vigor Heartburst kills them, even if they have buffs, that doesn't matter. And then otherwise being super tanky, like she's so insanely tanky that she tanks buff monsters without any issue. And so you can get one kill with Vigor Heartburst, and then you can Vigor Bloodbite, get kills with that. That scales with kills. So after one kill, it's good. And after 2 kills, you're killing things, even if they're like quite heavily buffed. So you can then kill things every 85 seconds. And, well, you know what? Why not use her with something that does Element Accelerate on her, like, the Lady Faith that we just looked at. And so then that 85 seconds becomes what? 68 seconds? That then is going to be healing her up every time? Actually, no, 68 is from normal Accelerate. I don't know what Element Accelerate would be. Even less, like 64 maybe, 63 maybe, and repeatedly healing herself up to 100% HP and killing enemies at that speed is insane. There's so many crazy things you can do. One last thing you can do, which is honestly stupidly broken, is if you do Enraged Teammate on her, the way that Enraged Teammate works with Perfect Stance is that it still puts the defense to the minimum defense. However, they still get the 80% damage reduction. So when she's when she's below 90% HP, she just gets one shot stupidly easily because she has minimum defense. But when she's over 90% HP, she still has the 80% damage reduction. So it's like what would be the maximum damage something deals, but then reduced by 80%. So what that works out as is, actually, if I didn't figure this out before, it's roughly equivalent to... so piercing and when it's minimum defense makes things do roughly double damage, but then you've got, it's 1/5 of that, so it's still less than half damage, which is more like a higher than full defense. Yeah, basically she's still really tanky, over full defense kind of defense when she's over 90%, and it doubles her attack. So Blood Drain becomes super, super powerful. Because of the interaction again with Perfect Stance, it actually multiplies the damage by way more. I think it multiplies it by 5 times rather than double. Or maybe it's yeah, that's right. It's 5 times and the double. So it doubles, but then because of the Perfect Stance doing the 80% damage reduction, which is 1/5, it times it by 5. So basically, the damage moves become 10 times as strong. So I hope that was clear enough. Basically, if you Rage Teammate her, she's still very tanky, and she does 10 times damage. So Blood Drain becomes a one-shot that just fully heals her every 42 seconds. And you can Element Accelerate that to make it stupidly fast. Nearly just over 30 seconds. I think it's 31 seconds. Yeah, there's crazy things you can do with her. She's so ridiculously overpowered. I do hope they nerf her, and I'm sorry to the people who own her, but honestly, you guys have to accept that there's too much on here. There's way too much. And she needs to be nerfed in some way so that she's more balanced, because otherwise everyone is going to get Carmilla over the next year or two, and we're all going to be using her, and then she's going to really push the power level of everything. So yeah, that's my stance on it. I do hope she gets nerfed, and it's not just because I've opened quite a few packs and not got her yet. But anyway, let's move to the next monster. This next monster is the last monster we're going to be talking about in this video, and this is also extremely powerful. So I have it in as S in PvP, but I'm actually going to move it to S+. I've got this monster, I've used it quite a bit, and I was hesitant to put it in S+, because, does it stand up to Carmilla? Well, it's not quite as strong as Carmilla, but it's not too far off. This is without a doubt the second strongest monster that we've had come out this year. And if you can't guess it, yes, Shadow is getting seriously good by getting a few of some of the best monsters in the game coming out in Shadow. Helped by the fact that Shadow is getting a lot more monsters in general than the other elements. But anyway, let's talk about Soral itself. So where you get this monster is in the monster shop. You need 80 tickets to awaken it. It's still good in the second form though, at just 20 tickets. This is the premium monster to save up for. If you can save up those 6-star tickets, this is very much what I would recommend to get. So it is tanky. It's lowish speed, but to be honest, kind of the speed that we get on most monsters these days. It kind of makes it tankier. So it's generally tanky, and when it enters, it stealths your whole team. So it does become a bit awkward for them to kill. And if they don't kill it before it gets a turn, well then good luck winning that battle. It can set itself up with the instant bronze shell substitute, so you can pull back a teammate, which means this has good synergy with things that have entrances. Otherwise, it can save something that's asleep or stunned out of play, that kind of thing, without even killing it off. And then it can baby conversion the bronze shell that it makes. Baby conversion can also get rid of token monsters and other stuff, so like it's not just that single use, pull something back and baby conversion. If there's some token that you didn't want there, or some other monster that actually you just want to remove, you can just baby conversion that to get rid of it, and that's only 50 seconds. Most of the other conversion moves in the game are 70. Anyway, so when the baby comes in, I would actually show you the baby. It's the first form. It comes with the full stats. So it does, it tanks reasonably well and does good damage, and it has foggy entrance as well. So this not only is getting rid of a token or some kind of teammate that you don't want there, it actually is a 50-second stealth all on your team as well. And it gives you a kill, obviously, which this monster has double Blood Fury. So yeah, it can, like, as soon as it gets a turn, it can pull back a teammate, create the baby, stealth your team, and then 42 seconds later follow up with double Blood Fury. That is pretty insane anyway. It also has a single target attack in Union Attack, which does enough damage to like one-shot basically everything. The first form actually has Union Attack as well. It has like a hit all and a Union Attack. That's all it has, and that Union Attack is strong enough to one-shot all but like the tanky Legendaries, and obviously then doesn't do a great job against Mythics. But that is like decent damage. So this can has single target attacking, has double target attacking. Can deal with token disruption, can give you an extra entrance from a teammate. It gives you a lot of really good stuff for PvP. Stealth on your team. There's a lot of Stealth Bane around, and to be honest, that is Soral's massive counter, is Stealth Bane. But in general, it's really good support for the team. Definitely in PvE as well. Like Stealth, the AI doesn't deal with Stealth particularly well. And I've got this high in PvE. You can see it's because the damage moves, they do really good damage. Double Blood Fury is excellent, so even against slightly buffed enemies, this is really good. And the thing which I haven't talked about at all is this King of Birds passive. That means that when you've created a baby, then it can't be targeted. That Soral can't be targeted, so they have to kill the Ink Feather first before they can kill Soral. That is quite crazy, and that's why as soon as Soral gets a turn, it's very hard for the enemy team to win that battle, because you can control what's on your side of the battlefield, and they can't kill the Soral, which is like basically one of your top sweepers on the battlefield at the time, because it can every 85 seconds kill something, or it can double kill at 136 seconds. So yeah, this is very strong. Works everywhere. You don't really need any support with it, but it does work better with birds. The best thing to combine this with is Plumealisk, because Plumealisk creates some babies too, which you can turn into the better monster really of the Ink Feather. You can baby conversion the babies of the Plumealisk. They're both birds. All of them are birds. They all have Union Attack, and Plumealisk is also stun protection. And a protector, which with stealth stuff, works really well. It's just on every level they synergize perfectly. So that's what Soral does. Definitely a really good monster. Something that people should be using. I've heard a few calls for it to be nerfed. I think, to be honest, this is the kind of top quality mythic that I can get behind. And not just because I own this monster, okay? I just make it clear. This is not any bias coming into it. This is because I think this does some useful and good stuff that's healthy for PvP in terms of it counters token disruption, and it allows you to kind of control what's on the battlefield. Unlike Carmilla, who's just oppressive in that you can't kill her and she just annihilates her way through your team, this is, okay, we're going to make PvP a bit smoother by dealing with the problem of having deadweight on your team. So I can get behind it on that front. It's also not super fast with things. It does still need to survive to its first turn. And then if you go for the double Blood Fury, there's a pretty big window there where they can kill off the Ink Feather and then kill Soral. That, if you're not in complete control, Soral will not win you the battle necessarily. They can fight back and kill it. It's just very awkward to deal with. So yeah, Sorrel's really cool. I love the design. I think the artwork's amazing as well. I like these monsters facing the player as well, facing the camera, rather than all facing left. So yeah, really really cool. I could just keep going on about it for ages. Instead, we're going to move on to the section talking about the highlights. Well, we had our two biggest highlights right at the end there, and in fact, the Legendaries were not too long before. Four incredibly strong monsters we're looking at here. Carmilla's just completely overpowered, being a tanky sweeper. Sorrel being it's got backstab, it's got stealth, it's a crazy sweeper, difficult to deal with. Really, really smooths out your team as you use it. And it's actually, I didn't mention when I was looking at it, it supports the Link Shadow stealth stuff, which I was like, yes! When we got Rabbit, I was like, no, this doesn't quite do it. And then Sorrel really hits the nail with it. So it can be used with Zulong very nicely as well. Anyway, so that's the cool stuff Sorrel does. Then we also had NM Fox, if you can remember me talking about it a little while ago. I've been rambled about a few monsters in between. NM Fox, incredible control sweeper that is tanky. Really like the design as well of using it with other elements. You can choose how you do it in your setup, and it depends on the enemies, which creates interesting decisions to be made in the battle. And then we've got Lady Faith, which I was saying it Lady Faith all the way through, but Lady Faith is probably how we should be saying it. Very powerful token disruption, and also supporting both Holy and Shadow. It's a very cool design, definitely very strong, and will help Link Shadow a lot. I mean, looking at these, Carmilla is technically a Link monster. It's got the Link secret skill. Sorrel is also going to support Link Shadow very well. The baby conversion does create a Shadow teammate, which will help Link kind of smooth out Link if they're doing any token disruption, or if you've got other elements and it's kind of not lined up well, you can make your team be Link Shadow again. NM Fox, of these four highlights, it is the one that doesn't care about Link. You want to be using it with a Holy teammate, and then probably Fire or Storm. But anyway, very heavy support here for Link Shadow, making Shadow setup stronger. So the strength in general, very high across here. Really, we've got two insane mythics, four very strong PvP monsters, which were the four that we just looked on the last page. The super epics were not so exciting. I put the Seer Guard high. I do think it needs to be built around a bit though, or to be in a certain meta where poison is very common. But generally speaking, those super epics, some of them are interesting design, but they're not very strong. However, overall, we got incredible support for Shadow this year. Last year we also got loads of Shadow monsters, and that was great support then as well. I think last year, the way I talked about the Shadow monsters, I didn't have a few of them that high in the tier list, and then since that video I have put them higher in the tier list. I love the design. I in the video I really bigged it up at the highlight screen. I was like, yeah, I love this monster, and actually they were stronger than I was giving them credit for in the tier list. So the last 2 years we've had enormous amount of power coming to Shadow, and actually just since the anniversary to when I'm making this video, we've had another really strong Shadow monster as well. I honestly think Link Shadow over the next year is going to become one of the top Link elements, and should be seeing a lot more play, especially when people get their hands on some of these mythics. So yeah, that's really exciting to see Shadow finally doing something in PvP. I think for the entire duration of the game, it has not been a Link strategy that anyone has, it's never been top tier. And so for it finally to get a chance being top tier, I think it's very cool, especially because I have grown a love of Shadow over the years, because it's the best element in PvE, and so I've used a lot of the Shadow monsters, and I've always thought it'd be fun to actually be able to bring some of them into PvP. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I know I've gone long yet again. It's just the way things are. But I wanted to ramble longer about some of those monsters, and I hope you appreciate the input and insight into some things. And I hope you're not a Carmilla user being like, no, why did he say that it should be nerfed? I don't want it nerfed. But I think that is the way that things need to go. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Next up, we're going to do Storm, so stick around for that. Should be around in a few days or a week. I'll see you then.